Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about the decline and importance of honeybees and pollinators and scientific research regarding how to deal with the number one killer of honeybees. With my guest, Katie Culbert. She is a 17-year-old scientist, researcher, and beekeeper. She has been the New Jersey Honey Queen, the New Jersey Beekeepers Association National 4-H Pollinator Habitat Ambassador, the 4-H Busy Bees Beekeeping Club host, and she is active in Profiles in STEM, Army Educational Outreach Program. She has received many awards, including the 2023 International Young Eco-Hero Award, the 2023 President's Environmental Youth Award from the Environmental Protection Agency, the 2022 New Jersey Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence, and the 2023 MIT Research Science Institute Award. And she has also been a finalist in the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair and in the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium. She has published her research, including in the Breakthroughs in Honeybee Health, Local Summer Weather Humidity Conditions, and many articles in the Journal of Research High School regarding her breakthroughs in honeybee health. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was fascinated to learn of your many years as a teenager. You're 17 now. You started around age 13 in how to tackle the problems of our honeybees and why we are losing them and why they are so important. Can you tell us why we need these pollinators?
Yes, that's a really great question. So I've been researching the honeybee, and so honeybees, along with all our pollinators, are extremely important. 1 out of every 3 bites of food we take is due to pollination. So you can just imagine all the different foods that we wouldn't have if we didn't have these crucial pollinators. Unfortunately, with honeybees specifically, they've been experiencing what is known as colony collapse disorder, which is why we're experiencing a great decline in the number of honeybees. And even all our pollinators are in a great decline recently, too.
There's really no substitute for bees. There are other pollinators, but bees are major, and we really need to be sure they survive, don't we?
Yes, we do. They're so extremely important, and I don't think any other pollinator could make up as big of an impact on pollination as bees do. One of my favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein, and he said that if the bee disappeared off the face of the earth, man would only have 4 years left to live. So that really puts in perspective how important bees are to our world.
And how important your work is also. Honeybees are a major pollinator, but aren't most insects pollinators?
There are a lot of different insects. Divided among insects, there's ones that are specifically pollinators. So honeybees, native bees, butterflies, some types of birds like hummingbirds are pollinators, as well as bats. So there are many different types of pollinators, but not all insects are pollinators.
Here in Southern California, I see hives that are moved around to the different agricultural fields. Is that happening all over the country?
Yes, so there's actually a whole entire almost like cycle that what are called commercial beekeepers follow, where they bring their bees to different farms and places like that across the country during different times of the year following certain seasons. So maybe in California right now there might be a lot of almond trees blossoming, so that might be why there's a lot of honeybees over there right now, because a lot of commercial beekeepers are bringing them over. And that's a really major part of sustaining our agriculture here in the United States. Honeybees are responsible for nearly 80% of all cultivated crops. So this whole cycle that we have with the honeybees traveling across the country is extremely important.
But you are also encouraging people to have native plant gardens that have pollinators and enjoy the native plants and have the pollinators keep keep them productive. And we can do that in our own backyards, front yards.
Yes, I'm a big promoter of anything that you can do can create big change, even if it seems really small. So I realized that not everyone can go out and become a beekeeper, and not everyone has to be honest. Simple things that you can do, like planting a native plant in your front yard or backyard or anywhere that there's space, can have a great help to our pollinators. Not just honeybees, but all the different types of pollinators, because as I mentioned earlier, they're all unfortunately in decline. And without these pollinators, a lot of the food and even our ecosystems would be greatly affected.
You maintain that one garden of 2,500 square feet has over 600 native plants. That's a lot.
Yes, I was able to establish that garden because I had received a grant from the Xerces Society. So with that grant, I was able to establish that garden in my local park where I have my bees. It was a whole great effort that I did with my 4-H club and all the other clubs in my county. And it was fun, and I know it's definitely helping a lot of our pollinators.
When you started beekeeping, how did you find the bees, and how do you create a colony? How does somebody get involved in doing this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I first became interested in honeybees, I reached out to local organizations and beekeepers to see if they could take me out to their beehives so I could get a little bit more of an idea of what beekeeping was like before I just dove right into starting up my own beehives. Meeting up with those local beekeepers, I found out that being around bees for me was weirdly calming, and I actually really enjoyed it. So the next steps were starting my own colonies, and there was a lot of different challenges that I had to figure out, like land, how was I going to pay for all the equipment that's needed. And so thankfully, through grants, I was able to establish my own beehive. Starting up your own beehive can be pretty expensive, and you'll probably want to set aside around $1,000 to start it all up. The first challenge is finding out where you want to establish this beehive. So for most backyard beekeepers, it would be on their property somewhere. But for me, I wanted to establish my beehives at a park so that people who aren't beekeepers could see what a hive is like from a distance. It's something that I feel like you don't really see on an everyday basis, so I thought having it at a public park would be really cool. The next part is you want to get all the equipment that's needed. So you need a hive box. There's many different types of hives out there, but the most common is the Langstroth hive. So I started with the Langstroth hive, which can cost around $300. And then there's also other essential equipment you need, like a smoker, a hive tool, but that will cost around $200. And then finally, of course, you need the bees. So you can buy what is known as a 3-pound package of bees, which is basically a bunch of bees in a box. And this is a little bit cheaper at around, I think, $200. Whereas you can also get what's known as a nuke of bees, which is basically a mini functioning colony with 5 frames of bees. It has a queen, and these bees are flying out and foraging. And so this, because it's a functioning hive, will cost a little bit more at around $300. So beekeeping is expensive to start, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth it in the long run.
And it really doesn't take much money after the start to maintain.
Yeah, it really doesn't. The most expensive part is just treatments for the varroa mites. That can cost around $100 each year, which isn't that much compared to how much it costs to start up your beehive.
Bees are threatened in many different ways. Not having the native plants, obviously agriculture is there and need the bees, but we hear of bee colony collapse. Is that due to the varroa mite, or is it due to the pesticides and insecticides that are used, or is it really a combination?
That's a great question. So colony collapse disorder is something that showed up around 20 years ago. Even though it's been around for quite a while now, it's still a big mystery, and researchers aren't exactly sure what the main causes of it are. Right now, it's believed that the varroa mite is the greatest contributor to colony collapse disorder, but there's also evidence that pesticides and new diseases and viruses that are spreading among bees also have an impact and are contributing to colony collapse disorder.
How serious is this bee colony collapse and the mites and other problems in bees surviving? Has it really been dealt with in the agricultural world, or is it still a serious problem?
Unfortunately, it's still a very serious problem. When it first occurred around 2006, most areas were losing colonies up to 90%. So almost 90% of all colonies were collapsing, and it was really scary, and we didn't really know why this was happening. And even 20 years later, we don't exactly know what the causes of it are, and we're still losing around 30 to 50% of colonies each year. I believe for this year, the annual loss was around 40%, which is still a lot of bee colonies that we're losing each year. The varroa mite is believed to be the greatest contributor to colony collapse disorder, and that is just because varroa mites are so detrimental to honeybees. A single mite can shorten the lifespan of a bee by 1/3 and 2 mites by 1/2. Basically, if a colony is diagnosed with, has a very high infestation of varroa mites, it most likely will not survive within the year. So varroa mites are very bad for honeybees, and we've been trying to do a lot to prevent varroa infestations, but unfortunately it's still a very big problem.
What I found fascinating is that you actually did some experiments to try to deal with these mites. You actually published an article about breakthroughs in honeybee health, continuous release mist diffusion of thymol-based essential oils. What is that, and what does it do, and why did it depend on a teenager to find a solution and not the scientists?
When I first became interested in honeybees and first learned about colony collapse disorder, I began researching what types of treatments are being used to get rid of the varroa mites. And what was really fascinating that I learned about was a lot of the treatments are actually pesticides, and pesticides, as we know, are extremely harmful to bees. They can also contaminate the products that bees produce, so they could also affect us human consumers. We all know that pesticides aren't really great for our environment. So I began researching other things, alternative treatments that are currently available, and I came across essential oils. So essential oils, when they were tested inside a laboratory setting where everything is perfectly controlled, had really high efficacy among these varroa mites. But then when they were brought outside into a field where this environment isn't controlled and the temperature and humidity fluctuate a lot on a day-to-day basis, the efficacy of these treatments were very low and could range a lot. So I began researching ways to possibly control that fluctuation so that the efficacy of the varroa mites would be extremely high, and that's how I came across the mist diffusion of essential oils. What's different about my solution is that instead of having the essential oils in a gel-based formula where they're completely dependent upon temperature and humidity to release the essential oils and work, I basically skipped over relying on temperature and humidity and used mist diffusion so that it would constantly release the essential oils and get rid of that reliance on temperature and relative humidity.
How many beekeepers and agriculturalists have adopted your procedure?
I recently published my work in the Journal of Research High School, and I finished my field study about a year ago. And I've been presenting my research to local beekeepers. I'm part of the New Jersey Beekeepers Association as well as the Central Jersey Beekeepers Association. And some of them have implemented the mist diffusion system that I created into their own beehives and have had successful results. I'm currently working on building my own mist diffuser that I could hopefully one day sell to other beekeepers.
How many bees do you actually have? How do you count them?
I have 2 beehives, and they're pretty healthy. So a healthy hive will have around 60,000 bees in their colony. So because I have 2, I would assume I have 120,000 bees.
You didn't stand there and count them, did you?
No, that would take way too long.
So you sort of do an estimate?
Yes.
These are bees that in the hive have honeycombs. How often do you take out the combs and eat the honey?
That actually depends on how strong your colony is or how long it's been established for. So the first year when I established my bees, unfortunately, I didn't get any honey. Because I live in New Jersey where we experience all 4 seasons, summer, winter, spring, fall, there's something called overwintering. So this is a time when the bees stay inside their colony because it's too cold for them to fly outside. And so bees need around 60 pounds of honey to get through the winter. So any honey that I got in that first year, I unfortunately couldn't take because my bees would need it to survive through the winter. Last year and this year, I was able to collect some honey. Depending on how well established your colony is, you can collect honey up to 3 times in a year where I live. but with my bees, I've only collected once each year.
I read where honey is still good hundreds, if not thousands of years later. They have found honey in tombs 2,000-3,000 years old and can be eaten.
Yeah, so that's the amazing thing about honey. It's even been found in ancient Egyptian tombs. It has everything that's needed for life. It has the water and sugars.
Is there just one species of honeybee, or are there many species, and how many species of bees actually exist?
Bees exist on every single continent except for Antarctica, and there's over 5 million species of bees. For honeybees specifically, there's 40 different subspecies. The most common is the European honeybee, which is typically used throughout the United States.
Bees obviously are fascinating, and we're going to talk more about honeybees and their importance as pollinators when we return in a moment with my guest, Katie Culbert, who is a young scientist and beekeeper.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Katie Culbert. She is a beekeeper doing lots of research on how to maintain our honeybees. You mentioned that there are a lot of subspecies of honeybees. How do they determine a subspecies, and is there any difference in raising them or where they live or how they pollinate?
As I mentioned, there's over 40 subspecies of honeybee. They have very different characteristics. So the type of honeybee that is most common where I live in New Jersey and most common throughout the United States is known as the Italian honeybee. So this honeybee is most commonly used because they produce a decent amount of honey and are typically non-aggressive, and they are basically always easily identified by their typical yellow color. So when you think of a honeybee, you'd probably be thinking of like an Italian honeybee. There's also the Africanized honeybee. So this honeybee isn't actually from Africa, as its name kind of is misleading. It's a cross species between South American honeybees and European honeybees. When my mom was a kid around the 80s, she was really scared of honeybees because these types of honeybees, Africanized honeybees, were all over the news as being killer bees. So these bees are not typically used because they're extremely aggressive, but the benefit of them is they produce lots and lots and lots of honey. The type of honeybees that I take care of are known as carniolan honeybees. So they're darker in color. They're a little bit more brownish blackish rather than that typical yellow color that we think of honeybees. And the reason why I chose these types of bees is because they're really hardy bees, so they'll go out on cold, wet days more often than any other type of honeybee, and they're also really gentle and easy to work with.
You mentioned that there are close to 5 million species of bees. I don't think there are 5 million scientists studying each and every one of those bees. Do all bees produce honey?
No, honeybees are the only type of bee that produce honey, given by their name, but all our bees are extremely important to us.
Many people are afraid of bee stings and are allergic to bee stings. How often have you been stung? I saw a YouTube video of you covered up. You have beekeeper clothes on to protect yourself. How dangerous is it?
That's a great question. So when I go out to my beehives, I typically wear a bee suit that covers my whole entire body, but I do only wear latex gloves, whereas some other beekeepers will wear leather gloves. The leather gloves will protect you from bee stings, but I chose to wear latex gloves because they help me hold on to the frames better and help me just have a better feel for the hive. There are some beekeepers out there that won't wear anything at all. Bees are really aggressive, and if you don't provoke them, they will not sting you. They're very intelligent creatures, and they'll know pretty quickly that you're not trying to harm them in any way. My bees, as I mentioned, are carniolan honeybees, and so mine are known to be very gentle and kind. So I've only been stung around 3-4 times, and I've had these hives for around 3 years now. So I think that's a pretty good statistic.
How do you follow them when they fly out of the hive and go do their pollinating? How far do they go?
Bees can actually fly up to 5 miles away from their colony if they find a really great source of nectar or pollen. I never actually follow my bees outside of their colony. at the end of the day, they'll all go back to their hives, which are located in a park that I have, and so I never really have to track all of them. And it's really amazing how the bees, no matter how far away they fly away from their colony, as long as it's within that 5-mile radius, they'll always be able to find their way back home.
I've heard of the bees doing some sort of dance as a communication to tell other bees where to fly. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, so that is known as the waggle dance. And so this is a way for bees to communicate different resources. So if there's a really good flower source that has lots of pollen and nectar, that worker bee will communicate to her other fellow worker bees like, hey, this is a really good source. We should go here. I've witnessed it only once before. It's kind of hard to notice if you're not really paying close attention, but bees in a colony all work for the better of the colony, so they'll work together to find the most amount of resources in the shortest amount of time possible.
You obviously have done a lot of study about bees. You have your bees to watch and to protect, and you have certainly published your work so that others can benefit from your discovery of new ways to solve some of these issues of fighting the mites with the oils. You certainly have deserved so many of the awards that you've received. How do they differ? The International Young Eco-Hero Awards are given to young people around the world, not just for beekeeping or animal care, but for other ecological solutions, solving other ecological problems. You have scientists giving you awards. You have politicians giving you awards. You presented your work. How do you feel about all this recognition?
I'm extremely thankful for all of the recognition that I've gotten. When I started this research with honeybees, all I wanted to do was to make an impact and help improve the honeybee populations, and I've never expected it to go as far as it has. But I'm extremely thankful for all the awards I've received, and I'll always be thankful for all the opportunities that have come my way because of everything that I've been doing with honeybees and all pollinators.
You are very active with 4-H, which is generally known as a young person's association that's more typically young people who are raising cattle, sheep, or other animals. You're raising bees. How does it compare?
4-H, that's where 4-H basically started, was kind of like with the farmers and cattle and things like that. But what's really interesting about 4-H is that it has grown so much more beyond that. There are some clubs that are focused on animals, like rabbits and things like that, but there's also clubs that are in fashion. So 4-H has really expanded how far it reaches, and so because of that, my bees were able to fit in perfectly, and I was able to start my own club with it.
Most curious to me is you started doing beekeeping at around 13 years of age. Why bees? I'm a cat lover. I want to take care of cats and save cats. I know we need bees, but I can cuddle a cat. I don't think I want to cuddle a bee.
Yeah, so even when I first got into bees, most of my family was like, really? Bees? Are you sure? You don't want to work with something that can't sting you, you know? It is a very interesting journey. During the pandemic, I was in 8th grade, and I basically had nothing to do that whole entire summer. So I came across a research contest that was hosted by the Army Educational Outreach Program, or AEOP, and it was proposed a way to help save our pollinators. And that's how I came across honeybees and the declines that they're going through, and I instantly became passionate about it because I know how important agriculture and food security and all of that is to our world. And so I wanted to try and make a difference.
You mentioned that your family thought it was odd that you were taking up beekeeping. Have they changed their opinion now?
I think they definitely have. Since I've had the bees for around 3 years now, I think my family has grown to think that they're really cool, and it definitely helps that they get a bottle of honey every year.
You have a lot of good holiday gifts. Of course, every animal is fascinating to study because they have so many characteristics. Insects are normally not considered as attractive as our mammals are, but yet when you look at them close up, they have a lot of interesting features, and some of the statistics are most fascinating, like a queen laying 2,000 eggs a day. What happens to those 2,000 eggs?
So all bees bees, regardless of what kind they are, will start off as eggs. For honeybees specifically, in about 3 to 4 days, those eggs will hatch and become what is known as larvae. So during this time, they're pearly white color in like a crescent shape, and they'll be taken care of by other bees known as nurse bees. And then in a few more days after that, they'll get a wax capping over them, and they'll develop into pupae. And then once these pupae develop for a couple more days, they'll chew through that capping and emerge as an adult bee. And what's really interesting is a queen bee, as long as that egg starts off as a fertilized egg, any type of fertilized egg can become a queen. It actually depends on how much of this royal jelly that they're fed. So a queen, if they are being developed, will be fed an enormous amount of royal jelly. But what's really interesting is that any type of fertilized egg has the potential to become a queen.
And the other bees are called worker bees. Are they male bees?
All worker bees are actually female bees. So there's around 50 to 60,000 worker bees in a colony. And then what are known as drone bees are the male bees. And there's only a couple hundred male bees inside a colony. So if you ever are out on a walk or something like that and you come across a honeybee, you're going to be looking at a female worker bee. A fun fact is drone bees can't sting you. So if you ever come across one, you don't have to be afraid.
You obviously aren't afraid to be working with bees, and I loved watching your YouTube channel. People want to see you in action. They go to Katie's Adventure in Beekeeping.
Yes, on YouTube, you just type that into the handle and you can find my channel. I also have an Instagram at katie.bees if you want another way to check me out.
Or if they really want to see your research, they can go to many publications, including the breakthroughs in honeybee health, local summer weather, humidity conditions. They can go to the Journal of Research High School, which you have put in many articles. And you're publishing all the time in other organizational publications too, aren't you?
Yes, I've actually published in the American Beekeeping Federation Quarterly on an essay about the preservation of honeybees and the effects of these different diseases that bees face.
You've presented your research studies at science fairs. How does it compare to what other young people are presenting at science fairs these days?
At science fairs, there's so many different categories that you can compete under. The range of what's at science fairs is very big and different, but what I've noticed is a lot of recent projects at science fairs are either centered around cancer research or about machine learning and artificial intelligence. Compared to my project, it's very different. I actually just came back from MIT's Research Science Institute, which takes around 100 kids from all across the world to study and research at MIT, and I was the only one who was working on insects or honeybees at that institute. So it was just really interesting to always kind of see that my project is always a little bit different than what everyone else is doing.
Certain species of animals, people want to have interbreeding from other groups of those animals. Do you have to worry about that with bees, or are they pretty self-sufficient?
Bees are pretty amazing when it comes to that, so they've worked out a way to make sure that there's no interbreeding or crossbreeding. What will happen is the male drone bees will fly a couple of miles away from their own hive and be like pretty high up in there, around 300 feet in the air, and then a queen bee from a different hive will fly over to this group of drone bees and mate with them. So that pretty much prevents any crossbreeding from taking place.
What are you working on now? Are you just maintaining your hives, or what kind of research are you pursuing?
For my research currently, I'm expanding more on what I've been researching for the past 3 years. So I'm currently working on building my own mist diffuser, and to make it more adjustable for beehives. Bees are very particular about their space. There's too big of a space within their hive. They'll instantly build out comb in that area because they don't like having extra space or gaps anywhere. I'm working on building a mist diffuser that can fit within those gaps so that it won't cause any disturbance to the bees.
I'm so pleased that you have found bees to to be your calling, and you are doing great work. Thank you so very much for letting us know the importance of bees, trying to keep our honeybee colonies alive and well. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
I have been speaking with Katie Culbert, who is the New Jersey Honey Queen, the New Jersey Beekeepers Association National 4-H Pollinator Habitat Ambassador, a National 4-H student leader, a 4-H Busy Bees Beekeeping Club host, recipient of many awards, including the 2023 International Young Eco Hero Award. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.